Yeah, this whole issue of a Christian response to environmental issues, this is a place where it's so easy for Christians to fall off on one side or the other. The path, I think, is quite narrow, although it's clear. I would argue that the Bible does speak pretty clearly about a Christian response to environmental issues. The place to go here is obviously Genesis 1 and 2. It speaks about both the creation of the world by God and begins to tell us why God created. And throughout the creation narrative, you see everything moving towards this pinnacle of creation, man, in God's image. It's not the only part of the creation, but there is definitely a movement in the creation story, in the creation accounts, of this all moving toward man. And so at the end, God blesses man and then says, with reference to the rest of creation, to man, be fruitful and subdue. Now that language, I think the best way to understand that language is make use of. I made this for you. This is for your enjoyment and for your good. And so make use of it. Make use of it for food. Make use of it for shelter. Make use of it for health. Make use of it for advancement, all sorts of progress. However, if that's the only thing that we look at in the environment, then we run the risk of falling off the side of tyrannizing the creation rather than using it as good stewards of creation. So we've got to hold in tension both the fact that creation was made, given, created for us, and even prior to that, it is a display of God's glory, a display of God's power. Paul says in Romans chapter 1, for God's invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and his divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. In other words, the heavens declare the glory of God. All of this puts on display. There's a wonderful verse in Psalm 104. How manifold are thy works, O Lord. In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures, which I think means that everything that God created contributes to the display of God's wisdom, his glory, his power. So we need both to use creation, but also to guard our use of creation so that it doesn't diminish the ability of creation to put God's glory on display. Now, how do you do that? You make sure that your use of creation, well, let me back up and say, there's two powerful forces in a human heart that try to get us off the path. Human greed makes us want to use creation and not attend to the beauty of creation, which puts God's glory on display. On the other side, a kind of supernatural spirituality, instead of using creation, wants to worship creation, the created instead of the creator. And so we elevate beauty to the expense of usefulness. There's a way to do this, to use creation and not mar it, so that God's glory continues to be put on display through the variety of species, through the variety of things that the world is made of.